Hi, all the listeners. Um, First of all, thanks for your overwhelming response for my first video where I put the Blue Prism ATA02 exams introduction. I got a very good feedback and a couple of questions which I was able to answer. I hope. So it motivates me to put another video where I go over to the architecture of the Blue Prism implementation. It will help all my or all the technical users, the technical architect or developers of Blue Prism to understand the complete infrastructure. So let's get started. So if you as I mentioned on the slide here, I tried to put all the components in a very user friendly manner. So the main component of a Blue Prism implementation are, I should say, these are the four components which are inside the black box, which are interactive client, runtime resources, application server, and the database server. The main point that we can remember here is the color coding of these all the four components. So if you see, except the database servers, all the other three components are of the same color coding. The motivation behind it is that our interactive client, runtime resources, and application servers can be, or I should say, we should virtualize these servers. Basically, in other words, these servers should be on virtualized technologies because there are multiple advantages of developing or deploying these components on virtualized servers. The very first advantage is consistency. Um, so take an example. If I want to replicate my runtime resources to multiple runtime resources, I will just copy existing runtime resource, which is my virtualized copy from my golden image, and create a new runtime resource. So that is one of the major one of the main reason where or why one should use virtualized servers. I will put another video where I'll explain the advantages of virtualization of each and every component, where we'll discuss all these advantages in detail. But for now, the main important point to be remembered here is that interactive client, runtime resources, and application servers can be, or I should say should be, virtualized. On the other hand, the database server, which I put in a kind of red block, that should be always on the physical server. That is the recommended approach from vendor, that is Blue Prism. The reason of the database server to be hosted on the physical server is that database server is the main core critical component of the Blue Prism implementation because it holds all the processes, all the audit, and all the user related information. And if we implement it on a virtualized server, there may be issues with the performance because sometimes database server does not behave or perform as it behaves on the physical hardware available to them. So, and on top of it, if there will be any issues with the performance of the database layer, then it will impact the complete implementation of Blue Prism. So that is the idea behind the color coding. So once again, just to repeat it, database server should be on a physical hardware, physical server. On the other hand, interactive client, runtime resources, and application server can be on the virtualized environment, virtualized servers. So with this, let's try to explain the architecture overview here. So I'll start from the left and I'll go to the right hand side. So if you see on the left side, I see there are multiple type of users. Few users are like from the my IT support team, and few are from the controller team. So controller, what it does is it directly interacts with the interactive client with the remote connection. So since we are discussing remote connection, so one should not remote login to interactive client or runtime resources directly by using RDP. It is not at all recommended approach. The detail I will put in another video how or what should we use to make a remote connection, but we should not use normal RDP connection to remote login to interactive client or runtime resources. So there are other softwares, as I mentioned. I will put another video to give you on details on those, how we can remote login so that it will not impact the processing on all these components. So coming back to the slide, controller can remote login to interactive client to um, control the processes which are running, to monitor the processes and stuff like that. On the other hand, support team should remote login to, or can remote login to interactive client as well as to runtime resources, just to see if there will be any issues. If somebody reports some issues on the runtime resources, take an example, if something is not working, so that support team can log into runtime resource by using remote connection to see what's going on, if something needs to be fixed. So that's why support team should have access to the runtime resources as well. Now, communication from application server to interactive client and runtime resources. If you see the color coding, I put operation communication, or I should say operating communication, in a blue arrows from application server to IC as well as RR. There are two-way communication, that is operating communication. So this is communication whereby interactive client and runtime resources get the required information related to the process, like the process schedule or process progress and process name, all those things. This communication is operating communication, and it is secure inbuilt by Blue Prism implementation. It is natively secure basically. So this communication will basically is requesting application server to process or to give them the required detail, and application server get this data from database server. I have shown it is another black double arrow from the database to the application server, and it will pass the data to interactive client or to the runtime resources accordingly. The next is communication between interactive client and runtime resources. So that is to control and configure robots. So that I showed in a dim green arrows. So basically, when one controller wants to run a process, from interactive client, it will instruct runtime resource to run a particular process. So that's where it comes into the picture. So the how the process will work is, controller will log into the interactive client by using remote connection, and it will instruct the runtime resource to run a process. Then runtime resource will get or will communicate with the application server with the help of operating communications, with the help of these blue arrows. Then accordingly, the application server will get the data from the database server and give it back to the runtime resources so that it will process it, the required process accordingly. So that's the complete flow of the process request. The other one is the scheduled robot. So that is communication between application server and the runtime resources. So that I showed in dark green arrows. That is a one-way communication bit from application server to the runtime resource. So this is basically, as I mentioned here on the video on the slide, scheduled robot. So we have multiple type of processes. Few of them are scheduled, like if I want to run XYZ process every time, every Monday 9 a.m. So that I can schedule in Blue Prism. So that scheduling event, basically application server will let a resource, runtime resource, know that this process has to be run at this time. So it communicate with the runtime resource, and runtime resource then, once you'll get the signal from application server, do operating communication, and then accordingly it will run the scheduled process at a scheduled time accordingly. So that is another part of communication which I mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, and with the green arrow. Now coming over to the right side, I have a business applications. So when a runtime resource run a process, it will directly interact with my business application, which actually run the processes. So that is communication, again a certificate based communication from my runtime resources to the business application, which actually does the process, or which actually does the business process. So that is another communication from the runtime resources. So another inbound communication to the runtime resource is from the web service, external web services. So I put it as a red arrow on the screen. So that is another, if runtime resource needs some data from a web service hosted external network, so it will come via web service. So with this, I think I have covered all the basic architecture of the Blue Prism implementation. The point which one should remember while going through this and while appearing for an exam is all type of communication. These are very important for the exam. What type of communication, like web services, whether it is an inbound communication, whether it is an outbound communication, or what sort of outbound communication runtime resource handles. In this case, like you can say the communication with the business applications, then communication with the application server, operating communication, which is two-way. It's not a one-way, it's a two-way communication, as I showed on the screen. So I think that is pretty much it for the architecture overview. Let me know if there will be any questions, any doubts. I will always try to help, and I'll try to answer any question that you guys will have. You can always contact me on my LinkedIn profile. This is my LinkedIn profile, and I'll put this link once again on the resources under the comment section of this video. And I have recently started my blog as well. So this is http learningforexam.blogspot.com. So I try to be it in sync with YouTube and the blogspot. So whatever I have discussed here, I will try to put it on the blog as well. So just try to go over this blog as well, and do not forget to subscribe to my video channel. Um, and I'll try to put more videos as we go down the line. So I'll try to put as much as information I can. Let me know if I can answer any question that you will have, and I'll be more than happy to answer that. Thank you.